Hello. As the moderator-elect for First Congregational Fort Worth, it's my duty to kick off our pledge drive with a plea for donations to the church. To do that, I want to talk a little bit about what I appreciate most about First Congregational. One of the things that Jody and I really liked when we first arrived is that this felt like a church that had a history, but wasn't shackled by it. And as time went by, I found myself wanting to know more about that history. So I asked for access to whatever historical records we had, and I dug in. Now, I don't know if you've ever read much church history, but these can often be pretty dry documents. There's a lot of, the church moved from the corner of this and that to the corner of so-and-so. There are dimensions of the sanctuary, descriptions of hiring architects, lots of very building-centric stuff. That's understandable, but it's not really the kind of thing that gets me going. The writer of the church history knows this, that it's not very exciting, so usually they'll try to convince you that it's worth reading. Take, for example, the history that was shared at FCC's 45th birthday celebration in 1948. The very first sentence of it reads, quote, "The history of First Congregational Church reads like a novel." And 4 paragraphs later, there's a discussion of contractor bids for the church building, complete with costs and a description of the light fixtures. 4 paragraphs later. Now, I'm poking a little fun. And while that's not a novel that I'm likely to pick up, the person who wrote this history is correct. There are stories of people taking great leaps of faith in our history, and those should be remembered and celebrated. What impressed me most as I looked into it was the evidence of a legacy of commitment to justice and to welcoming and to innovation. Innovation. First Congregational was founded in 1903, and in the early 1900s, accounts of sermons preached at various churches were commonplace in the local paper. Now, the earliest newspaper accounts of church services at FCC contained breathless reviews of our first pastor's handle on technology. His name was Reverend George W. Ray, and his secret weapon was the Stereopticon. If you're like me, you may not be super familiar with what that is. The best that I can tell, it's a cross between an overhead projector, like your math teacher may have used if you're as old as I am, and a Viewmaster with 2 slides. He apparently loved this thing, and on special occasions like Easter or Christmas or just whenever he felt like it, he would accompany his sermons with up to 50 slides of realistic photographs. I don't know what 50 slides of realistic photographs of an Easter sermon looks like, but apparently it was cutting edge stuff. The innovation goes beyond the sermon technology, though. In World War I, this church at their previous location on Pennsylvania Avenue stationed servicemen at Camp Bowie. And during World War II, the church provided childcare for mothers who were working at the plants in Fort Worth. There are stories of fundraisers for hurricane victims, for protests for peace and against hate speech, more recently, marches for mental illness, participation in the Pride Parade, service at Westcliff Elementary, room at the inn. I got to be honest, once I started listing things, I sort of felt an obligation to list them all, and I can't, so I'm sorry. But this is my point. We're at a crucial point right now, but we have never not been at a crucial point. It feels like there's a lot of change happening in the world and in our church, and that's because there is. On a service level, we've got a remodeled sanctuary. We have a new way of including people who choose to worship from home. If you go to our website, our most recent bulletin is dated March 8th, 2020. That's a sobering realization. It may even be heartbreaking for you. But this church's story, while not exactly a novel, is all about innovation and forging a new path forward. And what we're doing now is part of that legacy. We couldn't have predicted that we'd be exactly where we are now 18 months ago. I'm not sure that at any point in our history that statement would have been true. We don't know where we'll be in the next 18 months. And that's not just because of the pandemic. Now, that's not entirely true, maybe. There are some constants. There's something else that appears in our history over and over and over. I tried to pinpoint the date when it started, but I couldn't. But it turns out that our words of welcome that we say every week, no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. Those words are older than I expected them to be. I expected them to be a relatively new innovation. It goes pretty far back from what I can tell. And even when the words themselves aren't present, the spirit of them is present. Now, a lot of churches are welcoming, especially to new people. I made the mistake once of going to a small Lutheran church, and I thought they were going to make me sign adoption papers before I left. This church, I believe, is different. They're committed to the welcome. Our family's part of our journey has in part been deconstruction and reconstruction. We were heavily wounded by our last two churches, and this was kind of our last chance. And we found people who were willing to walk with us through the healing process. I know that we're not alone in that. Our story is unique, but it is not the only one. This is a place where truly all are welcome, even those who might otherwise be separated even by creed. This is a place where on any given Sunday, the pastor might say, I'm not so sure where I stand on this widely accepted Christian belief. And it's okay if you stand over there, but here's where I stand. And that kind of openness I find very powerful. That kind of welcome, that wherever you are on the journey, applies also to our pledge drive. If you're not in a place where it makes sense to give time or money, I can tell you from personal experience that your welcome will be no less enthusiastic. But if you are in a space where you're comfortable, I have two things to ask of you. The first is to consider pledging money to First Congregational in 2022. The kind of innovation where the church cabinet says yes to the idea of giving $100 to every family to give or to keep however they please. That kind of innovation is only possible if we have money in our account. So please consider pledging. And if you already give, consider increasing your giving if you can. The second ask is a little different. The pledge form this year also has a section on giving time. We have a great need. We have a great need for volunteers to do jobs around the building, but that's not all. We have a need for your gifts and talents to be recognized. You may have something to offer that none of us know about. And this is your opportunity to tell us what that thing is. Now, right now there's a funny looking box next to my head. That's called a QR code. And if you have a smartphone, you can open your camera app, point it at the code, and it will send you to the pledge form. There's also a good chance that the link to the form is shared with this video, whether you're watching live on Sunday morning or later on our social media. Now, we're having a celebration Sunday on October 17th, and we're going to announce our pledges for 2022 at that service. So if you can, please fill out the form before then. Thank you. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome.